What happened in that private meeting room last Tuesday changed everything. George Soros, the 94-year-old billionaire who has spent decades manipulating American politics from the shadows, thought he could intimidate Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett with threats and financial pressure. He screamed at her for 30 straight minutes, demanding she fall in line with his agenda. But when Crockett stood up and delivered her response, Soros went completely silent. What she said next not only shocked every billionaire in that room, but may have just saved American democracy itself. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss these shocking political revelations that the mainstream media won't tell you about. The meeting was supposed to be secret. Hidden away in a luxury penthouse overlooking the city, some of the most powerful people in America had gathered for what they called a democracy summit. But what happened behind those closed doors was anything but democratic. It was a billionaire's attempt to buy and control an elected representative of the American people. And for the first time in decades, one of them said no. To understand why this confrontation was so explosive, you need to know exactly who was in that room and what was at stake for America's future. Jasmine Crockett represents Texas's 30th congressional district, a seat she won by promising to fight for working families against the influence of big money in politics. At 43 years old, she's a former civil rights attorney who built her career defending ordinary Americans against powerful corporations. She grew up in a middle-class family in St. Louis, worked her way through law school, and has never forgotten where she came from. More importantly, she's never been afraid to take on the establishment when they try to silence the voice of the people. On the other side of that room sat George Soros, the Hungarian-American billionaire whose net worth exceeds $25 billion. For over 3 decades, Soros has used his massive fortune to influence elections, fund radical prosecutors, and push his vision of what America should become. Through his network of foundations and political action committees, he has spent over $32 billion trying to reshape American society. He doesn't just donate money to candidates, he expects complete loyalty in return. But Soros wasn't alone that day. The room was filled with other mega-donors, tech billionaires, and hedge fund managers who had collectively spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the recent elections. They had a simple message for Crockett: play ball with their agenda or face the consequences. The stakes couldn't have been higher. These weren't just wealthy people making suggestions. They were demanding that an elected representative abandon her promises to the voters who sent her to Congress. They wanted her to support legislation that would benefit their businesses, oppose regulations that would limit their power, and stay silent about their influence on American politics. What they didn't expect was that Jasmine Crockett had come to that meeting with her own agenda, and she was about to turn their entire world upside down. The meeting started quietly enough. Soros, dressed in his signature dark suit, sat at the head of a polished mahogany table surrounded by some of the wealthiest people in America. The penthouse windows offered a stunning view of the city below, but the atmosphere inside was tense and businesslike. Crockett had been invited under the pretense of a policy discussion about criminal justice reform. As a former civil rights attorney, she had legitimate expertise in the area, but within minutes it became clear this wasn't about policy at all. It was about control. The first warning sign came when Soros began speaking. His voice was soft, but commanding, as he outlined what he called mutual interests between Crockett's district and his organizations. He mentioned the millions of dollars his foundations had spent on voter registration drives in Texas. He talked about the prosecutors he had helped elect across the country. And then he got to the point. Congresswoman Crockett, Soros said, his Hungarian accent still noticeable after all these years in America. We have invested heavily in changing the direction of this country. Your election was part of that investment. Now it's time for you to deliver on our expectations. Crockett sat quietly, her hands folded on the table, as Soros continued. He outlined a specific legislative agenda he wanted her to support. Bills that would limit local law enforcement, regulations that would benefit his financial investments, immigration policies that aligned with his vision for America's future. "We're not asking for your opinion," said another billionaire at the table, a tech mogul whose social media platforms had been accused of censoring conservative voices. "We're telling you what needs to happen. You vote the way we need you to vote, and everyone benefits. You don't. And well..." He let the threat hang in the air. That's when Crockett spoke up for the first time. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I think there's been some confusion about why I'm here. I came to discuss policy that helps the people of my district. I didn't come to take orders from anyone." The room fell silent. These were people accustomed to getting their way through financial pressure and political influence. They weren't used to being challenged, especially not by someone they considered beneath them in the power structure.